friends! Today's video is actually going to be another collab. I realize I've had a couple of collabs recently, but I have another one today. Today's video is a collab with my very dear friend here on YouTube, Emily Han. You guys should definitely go check out her YouTube channel. She posts pretty regularly, she does live streams a lot, and she is like the queen of like creating fun Franken palettes, like taking a bunch of singles and like making them into like fun color stories. So you should definitely go check out Emily's channel. She's fantastic and lovely and hilarious and a very nice person. Thanks, Emily, for reaching out to me about this collab. Today's video, we're actually going to be talking about indie makeup and kind of the business side of production, you know? Like in my recent unpopular opinions video, somebody mentioned that indie brands are low-key charging luxury prices that we're falling for. And so Emily and I thought we could do a video kind of about that and kind of about why the pricing structure for indie brands are kind of different than like mass-produced multi-million-dollar companies that we see inside Sephora and Ulta. Granted, there are some indie brands inside Ulta and Sephora, so I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying like Urban Decay, Anastasia, Too Faced, Hourglass, Bare Minerals, these brands that are mainstream brands. We're gonna be doing Get Ready With Me's on both of our respective channels, using some of our favorite indie products and some of our favorite indie makeup brands. So I have a selection of things: eyeshadow palettes, highlighters, blushes, lip products. Everything else I'm gonna be using on my face is kind of like what I generally use, so like I'll skip over those parts, but we'll talk about kind of the topic at hand and kind of dig into all of that. That was the most long-winded intro. Holy crap. Ugh, apologies. So while I do my foundation, brand new fresh bottle. Oh yeah. So if you've been following me for any length of time, you know that I use a lot of indie products and I've talked about a lot of indie brands. It's something that I value. It's something that I think is important to support, especially in today's makeup world where there's so much stuff coming all at once, and supporting the smaller brands helps to diversify. It helps to create more competition within the market. And so I think supporting indie brands is important for sure. Kind of focusing on what that person said initially in the unpopular opinions video, that indie brands are charging luxury prices that we're low-key falling for. There are kind of different categories of like indie makeup brands, kind of different ways that they manufacture things, whether it is through private labeling, whether they're either grabbing like pre-made palettes, pre-made color stories, or kind of curating their own color stories using pre-made colors. Or there's indie brands that make things from scratch, that do everything themselves, make things by hand. So there's definitely different kinds of ways that indie brands operate. And the first category is when like indie brands will take palettes from private labels and essentially just put their name on it. Take pre-made palettes. Like I remember seeing a handful of those at Riley Rose. I know there was one palette that really stood out to me. I think it was from like Rude Cosmetics, that it was like a dupe for the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette, but like with a completely different cover. It was interesting because I've seen some palettes around online that look exactly like that palette. There's some brands where they've like marketed things like super, super bright palettes that have different pricing, and then you'll see the same palette from multiple brands. Those are the ones when you can tell that the private label, they've just picked pre-made color stories. But then you have kind of the other side of private labeling, which I don't have a problem with. For the most part, they have private labeled formulas that they work with, and they curate the color stories. They pick out the colors that they want. They pick the color stories out for their palettes, but they don't like physically make everything. And a lot of indie brands do that. So many. I feel like that's probably the most common, though I do see a handful of ones on Instagram where I see like repeats of the same palette, and then I'll see some on Instagram where they're like making things by hand. Usually that process is a lot slower, so it's kind of a question of whether or not you want to be able to get products out faster and get more products out faster, or control everything yourself. A brand that kind of does everything themselves, Cliana, is a great example. Cliana makes everything by hand. They make the packaging, like they do the palettes by hand, like this palette, it's hand painted. And for those, I'm sure the process is actually much different. A lot of times with these small indie brands, they don't have the same kind of like startup money that they're able to invest into everything before before the product is sold, which is when you get to pre-orders. Pre-orders are something that big brands don't really ever do because usually they want to get the product out as quickly as possible, and they have that startup money and they have that money to be able to manufacture everything beforehand. And so with indie brands, they don't always have that. They have to sell the product to be able to afford to make it. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong. They do the pre-order to see exactly of how many they need to make, and then maybe like make a little bit more than that, you know? And that way they don't take any sort of loss if they make too much product, or they have to wait to manufacture more if they don't make enough product. So pre-orders for indie brands are very standard, and I don't see any sort of problem with it. Obviously, doing pre-orders slow down the process of how quickly the consumer gets the product. But again, with indie brands, I don't care because, again, it's a small operation. They don't have factories of people making things constantly. They don't have like a big warehouse like in ColourPop where they get to make everything and ship it out at the same place. Which kind of brings us to cost. When it comes to spending money on products, I know how this is gonna sound, but I don't want it to sound that way. Like, I don't buy a lot of useless crap. I don't shop on Amazon, obviously. Like, my mom never bought things from IKEA. Pretty much everything in my house is either like old as shit or just like secondhand. So like, I've always been one to kind of understand the price of things that are a little bit more special. And so that kind of comes into makeup as well. Today I'm gonna use my Menagerie Feral palette. This I got for Christmas 2 Christmases ago. Love this palette. So with bigger brands, they are obviously making more of a thing. They're making more of a product. They're making maybe 500,000 as opposed to like 5,000. And if you have ever ordered things in bulk, you know, the more you buy of a thing, the less each individual thing costs. So with big brands, they get that bulk rate on pretty much everything, whether it's the ingredients to make the products or the actual manufacturing of the products themselves. So like if you order 500,000 units of like a carton, like a pallet container, each container is going to cost so much less than if you buy 5,000 of them. And so with big brands, they're able to pay less per thing. And so their profit margin is higher usually because they're still able to sell things for like a higher cost because it's like a luxury brand, you know, something like Hourglass. I don't know how high their manufacturing costs. I have no idea, but I think more and more people are starting to find out how much manufacturing costs because there's so many like small brands popping up. And so people are finding out, oh shit, like these big brands are making so much money on these palettes when indie brands have to either order a couple thousand of a thing or have to order a smaller amount of like mica to put in something. And so that increases their cost. It increases the cost that they have to pay to make a product or to order that product to be manufactured. So a lot of times with brands that do private labeling, their actual prices are lower. So something like, honestly, Morphe. Who knows what the percentage of products they have that are private labeled versus not. I know at least when they started, it was just pretty much Crown products with the Morphe label on it. Lots of tea behind Morphe. Some brands that I've seen online that are even smaller, they do just pre-made palettes that they slap their name on it. Sometimes the prices are like very, very low. So like you'll pay like $15 for like a 25 pan eyeshadow palette. They just like got from like a wholesale private labeling cheap stuff. And then you'll have indie brands that will have more curated color stories, but it's still private labeled formulas. When they're picking out the colors, there's time that goes into that. There's like effort, there's creativity that goes into it. And then you have brands like Cliana where they make everything by hand themselves, and it costs more because they're not making as much at a time. So when they order glitter or they order pigments, they're paying a lot more for those pigments than the big brands are. Now, I want to take Mariposa, just a little bit in the outer corner. I'm gonna add some shimmer on too. So, where was I going with this? This is scatterbrained, I realized. Emily, I really hope your video is a little more like linear, but a lot of times when I see people like criticizing indie brands for their prices, when they're like clearly just getting like private labeled pre-made palettes and they're jacking up the prices, like that's not great usually. But when things are a little more curated and a little more special, it makes sense. It costs more for them to make it. We're
doing a red look today.
And a little on my under eye too. I haven't done just like a straight red look in a while, but here we are. Such good eyeshadows, holy shit. And like Menagerie is made in Washington. They're a Washington-based brand, and I believe that they don't do private labeling. These matte formulas are fantastic. It's a great formula for a matte eyeshadow, and their palettes themselves are so beautiful and luxurious feeling. They're magnetic, so it's got like that really nice metal kind of base in there. Great palettes and great design on the palettes themselves. And that kind of comes into the cost of things too, like the packaging. When I see things that just look like Morphe palettes that just have a different label on it, I'm less inclined to want to buy it because it doesn't feel as special. Something like this, special. Something like this, special. Something like this, absolutely special. And I feel like now, because there's so many brands that are popping up on Instagram these days, people are just like kind of grasping at different ways to make their palettes look different. So you get things that are shaped weird, like the sugary cosmetics or like the makeup scientist or whatever, like all these things that are like weird shaped. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of things that are weird shaped. You know this. I much prefer like taking something that's like easy to store, like a rectangle or a square, and then like having beautiful artwork on it. Indie brands these days are having some of the most like unique and interesting palette designs that I'm appreciate these days, because I feel like so much of what we're seeing in like big mainstream stores are just getting really boring these days. They're just falling back on the same kind of design tropes, and they're falling back on like the same things. And then you get this like sense of like fun and freedom with independent brands because they don't have like
huge investors.
And then we get to shipping, and I feel like shipping is one of the biggest criticisms I see from people on indie brands, that I feel like it's unfounded, because shipping is expensive. Shipping is very expensive. Like, I used to own an Etsy store that I sold vintage things on. Shipping is not cheap when it's just one random person. Shipping can get to be very pricey depending on where you're shipping it. International shipping is extremely expensive, and it takes a long time. Where is my contour palette? To get it in a second. Jesus. Putting a little bit of this down here. So with independent brands, they have to do things really the only way that they can. And a lot of times they don't get like that sort of commercial rate that big brands do. So it costs them more to ship things. It just does. It costs more to ship things, especially overseas and especially internationally. That's why you see a lot of independent brands not even shipping internationally, because if they did, it would cost like $40 and then they would get so much shit for it. That sucks. Like, it sucks that they can't do that because of the shipping like restrictions, and maybe not restrictions, but like specifications for shipping, because it's not cheap. Like, it's not cheap to send things. And with big brands, because they have that same like profit margin that they make more per pallet, and they have that kind of startup money, they kind of, I can imagine, work some of the shipping cost into the actual product cost. Because if you buy something from like Sephora, if you buy enough from them, you get free shipping. Shipping isn't free. To actually ship something, it isn't free. And because people are so used to getting free shipping from these big brands and free shipping from things like Amazon Prime, it's creating this like level of like expectation that a lot of independent brands can't meet when it comes to shipping prices. And like where I work, we'll sometimes ship like gear out via eBay, and people get so mad that we have to charge so much for shipping. It's like, this is a 30-pound thing. You have to spend money to ship it. It's not like Amazon where they can afford to ship things for free. It's something that I think has negatively affected independent brands, has negatively affected a lot of brands, that they get this like bad reputation for charging more for shipping, because that's the reality of just like the way shipping costs are. Like, shipping via FedEx is way more expensive than USPS. So to either get things quickly, you have to spend a lot more, versus shipping more just like regular media mail that takes a lot longer to get to you. I needed to go grab my contour palette, and I was like, where is it? I don't know. It reminds me of like with Wish. Like, Wish takes so damn long to ship things because it's free shipping. Like, it's like the cheapest shipping possible, but it takes like 2 months to get there. And if most indie brands took 2 months to get to the customers, it wouldn't be good for them. Like, it wouldn't be a good reputation to have for your shipping to take 2 months to get to somebody. And that's just a fact. If a big brand did that, if a big brand shipped things out that wasn't a pre-order that took 2 months, people wouldn't buy from them. So indie brands have to kind of bite the bullet sometimes and charge more if they want things to get there quickly. And so it's something that also gets factored into the cost of products. So my Lunatick Cosmetic Labs is another independent brand that I am a huge fan of. I'm getting very close to hitting pan on these contour shades. It's great. They have a very specific aesthetic. Again, it's very beautiful, but it's still like easy to store. Like it's still a rectangle. Like I've said multiple times in my videos how I do not like palettes that are shaped weirdly. Yeah, like a half moon is fine. I was like, what weird shape would I be like into? I'm going to put on one of my JD Glow Galaxy shadows. I knew I had to use one of these if I was doing a video with Emily, because she was one of those people that like, not like made me buy it, but like was very influential in me buying these. Maybe a little bit of plum. Ooh, yes, a little bit of purple. JD Glow pretty much almost always takes a while to restock things, because with these shades, they're very special. Like the Galaxy shadows are very special formulas, and they're like $7. And these are huge. These are giant actual like colors, by the way. Huge amount of product. It's basically the size of a highlighter. Ooh, this is fun. It's not what I was intending to do today, but here we are. Yeah, JD Glow shadows are fantastic. They're so good. And those are like $7. Multi-chromes are quite a bit more expensive. Multi-chrome pigments are very expensive to actually manufacture. So like these are $7 that have more just like pigment, duochrome stuff, glitter. Multi-chromes, these are like $16. Like they're expensive. Do I need any more of these? I don't think so, because I'm good with one. But like the actual like multi-chrome shadows, ordering multi-chrome pigment is expensive. Like it's not cheap. Now for blush, I'm gonna use my Likely Makeup Clown Blush palette. This was another one that was like not that expensive. It was like 20 something dollars, which is like decent for a like blush palette that kind of doubles as an eyeshadow palette. I'm gonna mix these two. See if that works. I haven't used much of Circus because it's very red. All right, that's better. So basically, when I see people online like criticizing independent brands for charging more, obviously I have to look into the way that the brand is actually like structured, and if they're like more private labeled or more handmade. If they're handmade stuff, it's like it makes sense that it costs more, because it just costs more for them to make. To expect like the same level of like speed, cost, everything from all brands across the board, that's unrealistic. And I feel much better about spending more and supporting an independent brand, because it just helps to, again, diversify the market. Like so many of these independent brands that have popped up the last couple of years are owned by like women of color, which is awesome. And that's kind of why I feel much better about supporting smaller brands when they're behaving correctly. Granted, that's another whole issue altogether, but when it comes to like the pricing, it's like, I get it. I get why it costs us more to buy from them, because it costs more for them to make. Supporting independent local brands, any sort of local and independent company, just like helps your economy, helps your small economy, helps your local economy, and it helps keep like all the power away from like the biggest players. You know, the more competition you have in the market, the better it is for everyone, especially the consumer. The better it is for the consumer, the more companies are actually thriving. That is one of the things that I feel like I haven't mentioned as much when it comes to me like supporting smaller and independent brands, but like that's a huge thing in it. It's like lifting up these smaller brands only makes the entire market just more diversified, and it keeps the big brands from just like doing the dumbest stuff and getting away with it. So like if there's more competition, the big brands actually have to be better at what they're doing. The more competition, the more options the consumer has. Like the more options that we have to buy from when we're supporting smaller brands. Okay, now I just need to move on into doing my eyeshadow or my highlight. I think I want to do a little bit of Circuit. A little bit of Circuit, which is like a yellow guy. These highlighters are so good. They have like no base pigment, so that like when you're straight on, there's like not a white cast. It's just like, ooh, reflective. Like, ooh, fun, yellow, huh? And like high voltage, this green here, let me just, is like one of the most reflective, brightest highlighters I have. Like this color. Circuit's pretty good too, but not nearly as bright. And I'm a sucker for handmade things. Most of my jewelry is handmade. Like I have some clothes from handmade sellers on Etsy. Like I love it. I love buying handmade things because it's just like, I don't know, I love it. Another thing that kind of goes into pricing with smaller brands that are using private label formulas, they also don't have that overhead of like having to test the products for like a certain amount of time because the formula has been tested and it's good to go. Like they don't have to have that wait time to make sure that it's good, and they don't have to have like inspections. Like that's all taken care of for them. And so for smaller brands that use private labeling, that also kind of goes into like why it costs less for them, because they don't have to pay for the testing and pay for the waiting time, you know? So when they use private labels, all of that's taken care of for them. Okay. I don't have any independent brand mascaras, so I'm just going to use my same mascara. So I wanted to use some stuff from Kaleidos. I'm going to take a little bit of this shade, which is like just a straight kind of like toppery, glittery thing. Put it like right in the middle. Ooh, yes. Maybe a little bit on the inner corner as well, just to give it a little more sparkle. Oh, so pretty, so sparkly. I'm gonna be using the Never Dull lip gloss from the Smoky Glow collection because it's so good. It tastes good too. So yeah, this is the look we put together today, using all kinds of independent brands. We have Menagerie Cosmetics, based out of Washington State. Cleona Cosmetics, based out of Canada. I'm not exactly sure which province. JD Glow, Eyeshadow Galaxy Shadows. Likely Makeup Clown Blush, also Canadian. Lunatick Cosmetic Labs, somewhere in the US. Kaleidos Makeup, based out of China, manufactured there, shipped out of there. Oh, and then Midas, based out of Chicago. So yeah, that was today's video. Really, the point I was trying to make, and I don't know if I fully made that clear, is that people shouldn't expect independent brands to be the exact same structure that big multi-million-dollar brands are. People shouldn't try and like shame independent brands for charging more. We've just gotten so used to paying no money for shipping that now anytime we see like a shipping price more than like $6, it's just like,
Ooh, that's expensive.
like it's not. So yeah, definitely go check out Emily's video. I don't know exactly what she said in hers, but it was on the same sort of topic. For today's song of the day, let's see, what song do I want it to be? Today's song of the day is I Cut My Own Hair from We Are Scientists. They literally uploaded the video for this the other day where they cut their own hair. Well, Chris cut his own hair. You should watch it. But it's a fun time. It's a fun song. And that's the reason why, one of the reasons why I love them is that they're just like dorky as hell and don't care about being super serious. So I Cut My Own Hair from We Are Scientists is your song of the day. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to see more of my videos, please subscribe if you're new here. Thanks to my patrons. We just reached 100 patrons. Thank you guys so much. Like I never expected to get to that point, but like thank you so much. I appreciate it wholeheartedly. So thanks so much to my patrons. Thanks so much to Emily for reaching out and wanting to do this collab with me. I feel like this was a cool topic. If I expressed my opinion the way that I wanted it to remains to be seen. Who knows when I get this into editing? Hopefully I cut it down because I've been talking for
Almost an hour.
So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!